Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Forum show. Today I'm really delighted to be joined by Nat Eliason. He's someone I've been following on Twitter for a while, and is someone I'm so happy to be able to finally get onto the show. So thank you for joining me, Nat.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Teddy. I'm excited to be here.
So Nat, you're writing your first book, a self-published book, and previously with your old books, you landed a traditional publishing deal, but for your new novel, you've chosen to go indie. So why did you walk away from doing that from doing publishing and go on to self-publishing your book?
Yeah, a few reasons. So I published a nonfiction book last year called Crypto Confidential about working in the crypto industry from 21 to 22. That was a traditionally published deal with Penguin Random House, their imprint portfolio. It was a really good deal too. It was a $275K advance. So,
Wow.
it was a sizable deal, and they put a lot of work into it. And generally they were like pretty great. I really liked my editor. It was very helpful getting to go through that process and see how, Penguin Random House publishes a book, right? Like that's useful information, I think, to be exposed to.
Yeah.
But, there were also parts of it that I didn't like. And the big part of it was, at the end of the day, I've been an internet entrepreneur in some capacity for a decade now. I've sort of always been used to owning my upside and downside, for better or worse. And there were just parts of the process where I didn't have that much control or insight that ended up being frustrating, and I didn't like how the incentives were aligned. And so when I decided to do this kind of pivot from nonfiction to fiction and really go all in on sci-fi writing, which I'm really all in on at this point. I mean, I love it. I was like, you know what, I'm going to self-publish this, because if, in my head, if there is like at least one other person out there in the world doing something successfully, then like potentially I can figure out how to do it too. And there are a lot of people self-publishing fiction very successfully, and eventually turning them into big trad deals or movie deals or whatever. And it's like, okay, I think I can figure it out too. I just have to get started. And so decided to self-publish this book, and it's been a way more fun process than doing the trad deal, to be honest. It's not a criticism of them, that's more of a personality thing. And it comes out in 20 days, so we're getting close now.
Nice. Are you excited for it to be released?
Yeah, very excited. It's, I mean, you know how it is. It's like with a book, it's something that's basically just in your head and maybe a dozen other people's hands over the course of, could be a year, 2 years, 3 years. And then one day it's just done, and then it can be out in the world. And I mean, if you did a good enough job, somebody might read it in 40 years. Like, that's really cool. There's almost no other product like that. So I'm very excited to get it out.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, if you're Charles Dickens or something, your books are still being read like 150 years later. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I was just reading Neuromancer last month by William Gibson, and that came out in the 80s. So 40 years old. I mean, Jurassic Park, they're still making movies, and he published that in the 90s, I think. It's like, that's really cool. I mean, Dune, right? They just remade Dune, the movies, and he published that in 60s, 70s, 80s. It's a long time, right? But books do have this incredible longevity to them when they're good enough.
Yeah. I interviewed Kevin Anderson actually on this podcast, and he's still writing books about Dune. So that whole series is just like really, really gone on and on. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. I love it.
The first thing that made me want to message you actually to come on this show was when you sent an email out to your email list. And one of the things that I pulled out, and it kind of links back to what you just said, was that you wanted to make Husk look like it wasn't self-published. So what specifically were you going to try to do to try and hit that bar?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I've got my paperbacks right here, and which is like an awesome feeling, right? To actually get to hold your books. And my hardcovers get delivered tomorrow, so I'm very excited to get those. And there were a couple hangups I had with self-publishing. One was, big publishers are not very good at the marketing side. And they're good at PR if you're already famous and you're already a big name. But the thing that they are very good at is getting books into bookstores and making books that look beautiful and high quality and very, very professionally done. Do I have Crypto Confidential here? I have. This is the UK version, but so this is Crypto Confidential, and it's like the cover's great, the spine and the back, and like the page layouts. They did a really incredible job making a beautiful book. And unfortunately, most people don't invest enough in their self-published book to make it look like a serious book. And I hate to use that word because obviously people have put a ton of work into it, and they've written it for a very long time, but then they slap like a Fiverr cover on it, and they don't do kind of like a standard page layout and stuff. And the minute you open it, or the minute you look at it on Amazon, like,
Yeah.
this, it's self-published, which isn't necessarily bad, but when somebody hasn't heavily invested in the physical production of the book, to me, that signals that they didn't invest that much in the writing either. And I know that's not always fair. I know that's not, but it's a signal, right? It's like how you package it and present it is going to affect how people judge it. And so I knew that if I wanted to go the self-publishing route, I needed to do everything in my power to make it not look self-published. It needed to look as professionally polished as possible. And I'm somewhat lucky in that I've just been in the world of books in some capacity for a long time, that I have decently good like mental standards for what looks good and have a little bit of design experience and skills. So I have like some taste, but then a lot of it was just like finding a good team to work with where I knew they were going to create like a really good package. And I mean, I love the cover. The cover's great. And like, all the fonts came out really good too. I love these like act titles and chapter titles on the page. It's just like, it looks like a trad pub book. That was honestly one of the biggest factors to me with going self-pub, was investing heavily to make it not look like I kind of slapped it together at the end. Because especially in fiction, if you go to Amazon and you look at like the top 100 hard sci-fi Kindle books or something, if you just do a quick scroll through it, you can almost instantly tell which ones are like trad versus self, usually just like based on the cover. And to me though, that's really promising, because it's like, okay, some of these books with the like rougher covers and the rougher blurbs and stuff are still selling really well. So it's not a disqualifier, but I think there is a bridge. There's people who like read a ton of books and are just like constantly getting the new book in their genre. And then there are people who read like a few a year. And the people who read a few a year are not like trolling the top charts for the next book. They're kind of like going with what gets recommended to them. And they're going to be, I think, a little bit more turned off by a casual production. And so, to me, it's like, I wanted to make it look really, really good, and without completely like breaking the bank, because you could spend a completely absurd amount on it. But yeah, that was the main thing I was trying to get past.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's really good advice, because it's what you just said. A lot of people, especially you see it in romance, people just read like sometimes even a book a day. They're called like whale readers.
Oh yeah.
And so you see the top charts all just like really hunky cowboys, like standing there. And you do have to kind of hit those tropes, but also you want to make your book stand out and look really professional, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I think there's actually some magic in, like there are, romance is a great example where there are writers who are very good at like churning out those books that scratch that itch. And then they have that kind of like tropey cover on them. But I suspect the way you go from that to like Nora Roberts is investing a little bit more in the production so that it can make that gap from, or make the jump from the person who reads one of those a day to the person who reads one of them a month, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like the writing quality isn't the only factor. It's also like how this is going to look on a bookshelf. And when you look at like a Nora Roberts book on a bookshelf, it doesn't have that explicit, this is porn cover to it, even though the interior is like, maybe similar, like toned down a little bit, right? But there is, I think, a lot of value in making that extra investment. And that's probably, I think, one of the benefits of coming at this from the entrepreneur background is I don't have the like, I need to spend the smallest amount possible on this book mindset that I've noticed a lot of self-published authors have. I like, you go on the self-published subreddit or whatever, and it's, if you're spending $100 on a cover, like, it's just not going to look very good. I'm sorry. Like you're going to be able to tell. And so, yeah, I do think some investment goes a long way, because again, it's like, this could be a 20-year product. So you may as well like put in more work up front.
So with all this effort you're putting into making the book look good on the screen as well, you also want to make sure it looks good when people are holding it. So how are you getting that printing done, or are you relying just on doing it print through demand at Amazon?
Ingram.
Nice.
So
okay.
using Ingram for the paperback and the hardcover, and then Kindle obviously just directly through Amazon, which, and like Ingram I've been really happy with. You know, there are these little things like a print on demand paperback has the crease, you know, it's sort of like the inside baseball of self-publishing. Like you start to notice the crease on the spine that isn't really there in a lot of traditionally published paperbacks. Like the Crypto Confidential paperback, there's no crease on the spine. And Ingram still has it, but it's fainter. And so you don't notice it quite as much. Whereas with a KDP print on demand, I really notice it. And you can sort of like feel the cover textures a little bit different. And I mean, I'm kind of a nut about this. So I know that 99% of readers are not going to notice these things, but like I'm going to notice them. And at the end of the day, it's like my product and I want to be really happy with it. So Ingram's been really good. And I'm excited to get the hardcovers. I've gotten other hardcovers through Ingram that look great. You know, Elliot Pepper?
Sorry, so who? Sorry?
Elliot Pepper?
No, I don't know that name.
He's another self-pub author. He's got 10, 11 books out.
Nice.
And I got one of his hardcovers that he does through Ingram, and it looks fantastic. It looks really, really good. So
great.
I'm excited to see how mine come out too.
Ingram can help you get the book into stores as well, which is quite nice if
yes.
you can work with that.
Yeah. And I didn't know this until I started doing the production for Husk, but it's actually an argument for releasing a paperback and a hardcover, is that even if you don't sell many hardcovers on, say, Amazon, a lot of bookstores will prefer to order hardcovers instead of paperbacks just because they can charge more for them for like about the same shelf space. And so it's worth getting both of them produced on Ingram so that if a bookstore does order your book because you're, you know, ranking highly on Amazon or whatever, they have that option available and you make more money.
Yeah, nice. Now, obviously, we just touched on it being you looking at this as more of a business opportunity rather than just you writing it. I know that the writing is obviously the passionate part, but you obviously want it to sell and to do well. Now, you've got a slight unfair advantage over a lot of people in that you've got hundreds of thousands of people following you on Twitter and your newsletter and things like that. But once you've got past that step of using your own audience to make your first sales, which is obviously the best strategy you can do, have you got any blueprint for how you're going to start getting it to a wider audience as well?
No. I mean, you know, it's so I obviously have a big advantage having the large audience. The caveat with that being not a single one of them has subscribed to me or followed me for my fiction writing.
Yeah.
So it's very different from a fiction author with a 2,000 person email list probably has more of an asset than me with 47,000 email subscribers who signed up to like learn about productivity or about note taking or about, like crypto or completely different things. Like some of them are definitely going to buy my fiction, but I don't know how many of them that is. But in terms of getting beyond my audience, step one is just like getting the book out, right? Because I want to actually have the asset available before I go market it too hard because, it's like, this, most people listening to this know this, like pre-selling a book is really hard. People don't pre-order books unless it's like a series or they absolutely love the author, right? Yeah. And I don't really have either of those going for me in this situation because, again, no one's ever read any fiction from me, and this is the first book in a series. So, I'm doing pre-sales, and we could talk about that a bit too if you want, because I did them through my site, and that's been a fun experiment. But once it's out, then I'm going to push it harder to my audience to get as much as I can from them. And then, you hopefully get the snowball rolling that way. You get word of mouth going. You start to get more reviews and all of that. But then from there, then I have to figure out, okay, like, how do I reach all the people who I'm not already reaching? And the thing I'm really going to focus on is like Bookstagram and BookTube, because I know how to do them. I already have a pretty big Instagram following from talking about nonfiction books. So I'm pivoting that to fiction. And I'm just going to go hard on being a sci-fi influencer. Like, I don't know that that's a good strategy for most people to take, but I know how to do the influencer thing pretty well. And I know how to like make that content, get it in the algorithm, get it to do well. And I can just include my book in those lists and just become somebody who people follow in the space. And so it makes it very easy for me to promote my book alongside that. So that'll be the big like marketing project, along with I think some of the other stuff like figuring out Amazon ads. I've never done that, but I'm excited to figure it out because there's probably going to be some potential there too.
Yeah, nice.
I was going to say, how does that answer land for you? Because you probably know more about this than I do. So
Yeah,
what's your reaction hearing that?
That does sound good. I think, yeah, advertising can be a great way to get your book in front of people who have never heard of you before, especially if you're targeting particular tropes, which I guess we'll come into in a little bit when we're talking about things like the AI sort of topics and things in your book. And, people do search for those tropes, like especially like with romance. You see people search the weirdest things, they'll search for like cowboy cozy romance, and that is people actually
vampire billionaire romance.
Exactly. Yeah, people do get into that sort of thing. I think with you, especially considering you've got that audience as well, getting in front of sci-fi people physically, with your large following, it'd be really easy for you to get at places like sci-fi conferences or book clubs where people are talking about those sort of sci-fi books, and I think people would want to hear from you because you've got
That's a good idea.
People would speak to you straight away just because you can say, look, I've got however many followers on Twitter and Instagram, and this is where people are coming from.
Yeah. That's a good idea. That didn't even cross my mind, but you're right. It's like the conference circuit is pretty big. And so it'd be fun to be able to get into that. Yeah. Well, and that's the advantage I have too, reaching out to like podcasts and other influencers is being able to say like, oh yeah, like, if you mention my book on your Bookstagram, I'll repost it, and I've got a ton of followers on Instagram, and so that'll hopefully help your account grow too.
Definitely.
And I think that'll be a useful strategy.
The other thing I think you sort of touched on just now is your main email list, however many people are on it, they haven't followed you for your books. So what you kind of want to do is get that part of the audience who are interested in your fiction books separated so that you can send them stuff about fiction. I think building out that mailing list is really, really important, but also you don't want to make sure you lose people from your main mailing list because you've started talking about monsters and AI and things like that.
I mean, I think I'm actually just going to pivot my entire email list to fiction. And I'm just going to tell everybody who's on it right now, like, deal. I'm not interested in talking about productivity or any of those old topics anymore. I'm pretty much like all in on making this career work. And if it doesn't work, I'm like not going to go back, I think, to the influencer thing. I'm going to like start a plumbing business or something that's not on the internet. So I think I'm just going to start sending them fiction content. And if they want to unsubscribe, cool. Like I don't really care about losing subscribers.
The reason why, the other thing that's quite important is doing newsletter swaps can be a really effective way. There's a couple of great tools you could use. Story Origin is one. I've interviewed him, and also Book Funnels. They're both really good ways for getting your books out there, and you can kind of do newsletter swaps with people. So if you are talking about sci-fi, for example, there's other people you can sort of swap with and say, hey, this is a book I'm talking about. And then you can get your book in front of their audience too. And with your size audience, you might be able to do that with some quite big people.
Yeah. I think you're right. That's a good idea. I should think about that. I think once Husk is out, then I'm going to start going a little harder on like the newsletter pivot, because again, I've been holding off on a lot of these things just because the book isn't out yet. And if you have no audience, then like, yes, it's worth starting to build the audience earlier to like get that ball rolling. But for me, it's like, I'd rather just wait until I can send people directly to the Amazon page and there are some reviews there and they could just click buy than try to drum up that interest now before it's ready. So, but yeah, doing the newsletter swaps and things is a really good idea. What have you seen do well in the like book newsletter, book blog world? Is it lists? Is it reviews? Like what seems to do well there?
So in the newsletter swaps, it tends to often just be a shout out. Like this is because the people who follow other authors, they're usually like mega fans, or they like kind of read everything that person puts out. So it can often be just a case of, hey, I've read this. This is something my friends read. You might like this too. And it's things you can read in between other people's books.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, writing reviews of other people's books can go down really well. It's obviously a bit more work. I think you might have to experiment a bit with that one. It depends on the audience a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'll just start playing with it. But I'm excited for that. My newsletter hasn't had a focused topic in a very long time. And it's nice to just be committed to something and to really like I said before, go all in on it.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you did a lot of writing before this, but writing a book is completely different to writing blog posts, articles. And I know you wrote your nonfiction book, but it's completely different because you're not really plotting it out in the same way. How did you approach plotting the book to make sure that it was doing really well? Because I know you wrote it in something like 4 weeks. So I'd love to go through that whole process.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of caveats to that. I mean, one, so my nonfiction book was narrative nonfiction. So I had to learn how to tell, a book length story for that. And that was kind of what started all of this. But then in the process of doing that for Crypto Confidential, I kept having these moments of like, oh, this would actually be a better story if this happened. But I couldn't do that because, had to be nonfiction. And so that kind of like piqued the interest in doing a novel. And there was still a lot of work that I had to figure out around like, okay, how do you actually plan this? How do you outline it? How do you review it? Like what's working, what's not? Like how do you edit at the scene level or the act level or all of these things? And a lot of that was just reps. Like, you mentioned that I wrote the first draft of Husk in about 4 weeks, and that's true. But there was a like very first stab at doing something in this universe that got to like 30,000 words, and I was trying to pants it. I was trying to just like discovery write, figure it out as I went. And it didn't work at all. It was terrible. It was just like going around in circles. And so I threw that away. And then I started another attempt at doing something in this world. And that I finished it. I did a second draft and I showed it to some people and they were kind of like, nah, it's okay. It wasn't that good. And so I threw that one away. And so this was really like the third attempt at doing something in this world. And by that point, I knew the characters very well. I knew the world very well. I knew some of the characters very well. I knew the world very well. I had a very good idea of like where it was going to go. And before I did that crazy 4-week sprint, I spent a week like planning it out in relatively significant detail. So when I sat down for the writing sprint, I had the like 60 scenes that I thought were going to be in it. I had a lot of the chapters. I had a lot of the like main arcs, and obviously stuff changed as I went. And you like that happens as you're writing, but that made it a lot easier to like sit down and do that sprint. I don't know that I could have done that if I was completely starting cold on a new idea and hadn't figured a lot of these things out yet. But I mean, I've read like all the different ways to outline a book and how to plan a book. And at the end of the day, I just feel like getting in reps is the most helpful thing. It's like, this was the third attempt at a novel, the fourth attempt at a book. And now I'm finishing up a novella in the same universe, and I've started on Husk 2. And it's like each rep, it just gets easier and it starts to feel more natural. And I think one of the hardest things is learning to think on a 100, 120, 150,000 word arc versus thinking on a 1,500 word article arc. It's like that's a real reprogramming of your brain as a writer. And it's made it very hard to go back to writing articles because I'm not interested in that length anymore. And it feels like there's just too much to say. So it's a boring answer, but it does feel like just getting more reps in is the most helpful thing. And to a certain extent, getting new reps in. Like, I think it's easy to waste a lot of time editing something over and over and over and over again. But like 70% of how good something is going to ever be is probably in the first draft. And so at some point, I think you either need to just like ship it and move on or toss it and move on. Like, you can only keep polishing it so much. And I think I've been good about, just like starting the next rep, getting it as good as I can, starting the next rep and continuing to learn that way.
I like that answer. It reminds me a bit of that meme with that guy reading a book and he looks up and he's crying. And the answer is to the book is just work harder,
Yeah. Exactly. The secrets to success or whatever. Exactly. And then the answer is work harder. Yeah.
Now, have you wanted to write a book for a long time, or was there a specific moment where you thought, okay, this is the book I want to write?
I wanted to write a nonfiction book of some type for a long time. And I sort of always felt like the blog was building towards that eventually. But then, kind of as soon as I did and started to think about it as a career, I got more and more interested in fiction because I think a lot of the ideas that I would be interested in writing a nonfiction book about just work better in fiction. Like I'm very interested in some of these philosophy of mind concepts and like consciousness and identity and death and like, all of those things. You definitely can write a nonfiction book, like a philosophy book, and 200 people will read it and it'll be kind of like this niche thing. Or you take a few of those ideas and you turn them into like a sci-fi thriller, and suddenly it has mass market appeal, and the people who are interested in that part of it will really enjoy that part of it, and the people who aren't interested in that part of it will just have like a fun story. So it's I think a better way to package a lot of that content, so that it's more marketable and so it can reach more people. And when I started looking through a lot of the topics that I wanted to write about, I was like, these would just be more fun as stories instead of nonfiction like think pieces. And that's been a lot of fun. It's like now I just have too many ideas and I don't know how I'm ever going to have time for them.
I love that answer because I speak to so many writers who are like, oh, I always wanted to be a writer. I've always just, since childhood, I want to do this. But you really are coming at this from a business point of view, which I love. You've got these ideas and your way of expressing them is actually, you want to turn this into a business that's more sustainable. So I think that's a really interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely wasn't somebody who like always wanted to write a book growing up. I didn't do any real writing as a kid. I kind of stumbled into it in college for work, and then I ended up writing in some capacity for the last 13 years. And from doing it a lot, ended up enjoying it more, and it's slowly becoming the thing that I got good at. And now I do really enjoy it and I do really like it. And if I can make it work as the main way I make money, it's like that's a huge win. So that's like you said, just coming at it from the business case as well as the romantic one.
Yeah, definitely. Were there any big influences that you had on writing this book? And those influences could be, both other writers, or it could be things that are happening which made you want to write this story.
Yes, in terms of the like concepts, a lot of it, for Husk and for the Maru Initiative, this whole world, a lot of it is derived from this idea that we are accelerating faster and faster towards this technological future, and there are a lot of kind of like people out there talking about how we're going to achieve immortality through science. And that to me, is sort of like fraught with potential problems and like unintended consequences. And the world for the book came from considering two possible ways that we might try to do that could go wrongly. So one, through re-engineering the food supply, right, for maximum like health and yield and all of these things. And that isn't discussed in Husk. It's part of the backstory. It'll be in a book eventually, but that's basically like what causes the like quasi-apocalypse that like wipes out most of the world. And then the other side of it is achieving immortality through digital transference. So you hear this talked about in like the AI discussions and computing discussions and tools like Neuralink and stuff, where it's like, oh yeah, one day you might be able to just transfer your mind into a computer and then you can like live forever in this digital world. And that's actually based on a very aggressive assumption about the nature of consciousness that you can argue both sides of, and we can never completely know the answer to, because at the end of the day, like the perception of subconsciousness will always be subjective. There's no way to have an objective understanding of somebody else's mind. And so even if you were in a world where it appeared we had solved transference, you would never know if it was actually working or not, or if the person on the other side was just a really good copy until you tried it yourself. And so then the question is like, would you try it? Right. And I think there are some people who are like, hell yeah, like I'm going in. And other people will be like, hell no, there's no way that this thing actually works. And you could never be sure of the answer. You could never know until you tried it yourself. And that's kind of an interesting problem, right? Like most of these things, we can look at somebody else's heart surgery and we can say like, oh, the heart surgery worked, like your heart is beating. And we can look at almost anything else and get a decent understanding of it from the outside, but like theory of mind, we can't. And so in this world, everybody has transferred their minds into computers and are living in this kind of like server world with a small quasi-slave population left on the outside to keep the servers running. And so what does that look like, right? Like what is this world where most people are living in a digital paradise and a few people are on the outside having to maintain the servers? And what kind of problems or things might happen in that world that like lead to these kind of like big conflicts? And so that was the opening question for creating the story. And it's a very fun world for me. It's very fun to build because like I was a philosophy major in college, and so that's obviously had a decent impact here. And I went to Carnegie Mellon, which is like a big tech school, and their philosophy program was very like philosophy of mind, AI, nature of consciousness driven. And there are a ton of AI books coming out, like, oh, rogue AIs and, giving birth to superintelligence and whatnot. And like, to me, it's kind of a boring topic. It's not like boring is the wrong word. It's overplayed, right? It's like everyone's talking about that. And I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle where I'm saying like the AI isn't the interesting thing. The AI is like actual human minds in a computer. And, can we get there and what will it look like if we do? And that's been a lot of fun to play with, especially when you bring in the like, okay, all of the richest, most powerful people in the world can like now be immortal. So what happens if we lose the natural transference of like power and influence and ideas that comes from death? Like how important is death to the progress of civilization? And I think it's actually probably pretty important, right? Like Einstein had that line where it's like science advances one obituary at a time or something like that. Like you kind of have to let the old guard pass so that the new ideas can flourish. And so if the old guard can live forever, right, then like what happens? So it's all just been very, very fun. And then with the understanding that most people are not as interested in reading these ideas raw as I am. And so how do I create a very fun, exciting, fast-paced story to wrap them in to get them out there in a more mass market package? And that's a really cool challenge.
Yeah, definitely. The ideas you're talking about are obviously very interesting, but again, what you talked about before sounds more like philosophy or an idea, but you had to weave in that story of where there is jeopardy and where problems are happening. So when you were building out that story of the bad thing that was going to happen that was going to cause the story to be interesting, how did you plot that out?
I had a pretty good idea from the get-go of like what the problem would be, which is like one, when you hear like, okay, humanity's living in digital immortality, there's a small group on the outside who's trying to keep the lights on, and they're sort of beholden to the people in the servers. I think your first instinct when you hear that would be like, oh, this is going to be a sort of like Hunger Games or Red Rising-esque like revolt against the upper class, right? This kind of like populist uprising story. And that was kind of like my first thought. And I was like, well, that can be a very interesting story for sure, but it feels a little bit too obvious.
Yeah.
And so, let's keep the somebody hates the digital paradise and wants to destroy it. But what if the person who wants to destroy it is actually one of the people in the paradise? So it's not somebody on the outside. It's not somebody who's like keeping the servers running so that they can transfer into it. It's somebody who's already in there, who's apparently immortal and omnipotent and has this perfect life, but they want to destroy it, right? Like, who is that and why do they want to take it down? And what could their motivations possibly be? And then how do these people on the outside who are spending their lives keeping this paradise running so that they can become a part of it. How are they reacting to it? And then who else is on the outside that might not be immediately obvious at the beginning of the story, right? Like, what are the people who are not living in these like centers maintaining the paradise? Like, what are they doing and how do they factor into this? And then it started to get more interesting, where it was like, oh, okay, you know, what's actually going on in there? What's going on out here? Like, what happens when it does get attacked? How do people react to their paradise like being threatened? And then it started to build into this more interesting world of these like digital gods, in a sense, warring amongst themselves for the power and control over the new world, which is this digital world, while still being beholden to the whims of the people on the outside who could theoretically shut it off at any time. It's like you're both somewhat immortal and like can't die and whatever, but somebody could also just turn the power off. And so you're also kind of like very fragile, right? And so how do you protect against that? And what does your relationship look like with the people on the outside? And like, then it just started to get a lot more interesting, I found, where it wasn't this just struggle against power. It was like the struggle amongst powers for control of kind of like what's left of a dying world. And then it got a lot more fun.
Yeah, definitely. With it, it's because you've got, especially now, you've got these two worlds. You've got the paradise world and the kind of dystopian world of the people who are like actually living in real life.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard to keep a track of everything that was going on whilst you're world building?
Yes. And I still do. And because, you know, there are these two like important time periods. You know, one time period is like the fall. So it's when this bacteria breaks out. It's incredibly deadly. It's engineered, and so we don't have natural immunity to it. It's antibiotic resistant, everything, and it just like wipes out the vast majority of the world. At the same time that Meru, this paradise, is coming online and transference is being offered to people as a salvation. But all of that happens 100 years before Husk. And so I needed to know that time period very well and like what happened during it, so that when I'm referencing it as backstory in Husk, I'm not mixing anything up. And then you have these kind of like differences in knowledge between different characters, whether they're in Meru and like living in the digital world or they're in the physical world. And there are other aspects of that that get extra complicated for reasons that happen in the book that I'm not going to spoil. And so and the thing that I could have maybe put a little bit more time into from the get-go was like creating a strict timeline and, you know, a stricter wiki of like exactly what happened every step of the way. But I've sort of been figuring out half of it as I go, and then having to like slot it into the history is, you know, my understanding of it. Because, you know, the world just naturally grows and evolves as you explore it through your writing, but you have to, you know, maintain consistency, and you can, you know, paint yourself into corners sometimes. And so that's hard, especially with a series. I mean, wow, it's given me so much respect for people who do 6, 7, 8 book series and have something from book one that like recurs very well in the final book. It's just like, how did you plan that? Or did you not plan it and you were just like very creative in how you tied this random thing back in? You know, like, we'll never really know from the outside. But I could have put a little bit more time into that from the get-go, I think. But it's still, you know, working very well and very fun too, because it's like I'm discovering this world as well. And that's, I think, one of the bits of magic of writing fiction, is that even you, the author, don't really know what's going to happen until you're in it. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, the reason I asked that question was because a lot of the stuff you've talked about before your fiction journey is about productivity, you know, creating notes and being good at remembering that stuff. So did you have a system in place for trying to remember it, or is it now you've written the book and you have to wait?
And now it's just a Google Doc of just running notes. You know, I don't have like a crazy internal wiki or anything like that. And in part, I didn't do that because that seemed to me like the easiest way to procrastinate the actual writing. You know, I think a lot of books have died in the over world building before putting pen to paper. And also, when you do too much of that, you feel like you have to justify it by including all of it in the book.
Yeah.
And that can make books feel slow and heavy and over-described and overbuilt. And so I kind of wanted to avoid that and wanted to flush it out as I went, which has mostly worked. But for the next series, I'm going to spend a little bit longer on that step up front, just to get like a good scaffold in place, so I'm not building it on the way up.
A good tip for that is I spoke to Joanna Penn on this podcast like a week ago. She's quite a big podcaster in this industry, and she uses Google Notebook LM, which you can basically plug all your previous work into, and it can create like a wiki out of it, so you can learn. Right. You can ask your book questions and things like that. So Smart. You could upload your manuscripts in there and start like asking questions. Be like, oh, what was Isaac up to? Like back then.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. I should try that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, what last couple of questions? But the first one was you talked a bit about the pre-sale. Now, obviously, you've got that audience, but how's that pre-sale worked for you? And is there anything you've learned that you would improve upon next time?
Yeah, no, the pre-sale's been fun. So I built a Shopify store on my own domain, and I'm selling signed copies of my books through that. And I'm just doing the fulfillment myself out of my office here. And that's been a really cool experiment, because obviously you make more money if you sell your books directly than if you sell them through Amazon. And having the email list and everything, I can send some people there. And so I've sold like 220 copies of the book through my site, which is awesome. It's like $7,000 something in revenue, decent chunk of that's profit. And it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to be able to get those books out to people in the week before it publishes. And then I have their email addresses and whatnot, so I can ask them to leave a review or to share it or anything else, which you can't do when you sell through Amazon because you don't have any way to contact your customers. Yep. And so I feel really good about that. I think next time, I launched it like 2 months before publication date. That was probably too early. I think maybe next time I'd do it 2 or 3 weeks before and do a little bit more of an aggressive push, and then do the big launch week push. I got excited and wanted to like have it up early, but you know how it goes. You like announce it and you get a huge spike of sales, and then it just dies off to like nothing, right? Yep. Until you have the next big push. And so there's kind of like not much reason to do it a long period of time in advance, because then you sort of dilute your marketing. So I think squishing it closer together would be better. But I'm excited about that, because you're building a more direct relationship with your audience. I did this cool bundle where if you buy the hardcover on pre-order, you're getting a signed copy, plus you're getting the audiobook and the ebook for free. Mm-hmm. So you're getting all three formats bundled together for the price of what the hardcover will be at launch, which I can't do on Amazon, but I can do through my own site. And so I think that's a nice little incentive, and I can figure out other incentives I think to offer in the future too. Yeah. And hopefully as the series grows and more people find out about it, more people get excited about it, the pre-order numbers will grow as well. Yeah. So I didn't set any expectations. I was just like, however many pre-orders I get is great. And that's the floor for what I hope to improve on with the next book and the next book, and just keep growing that over time.
Nice. You could consider doing a Kickstarter as well, maybe, to launch the second book. It's a really big thing in self-publishing.
Yeah. It seems like that's getting bigger and bigger, and their cut isn't huge. And the cool thing with Kickstarter too is it's like you could spill out beyond your audience because it is a platform. Yeah. So I might look at that as well.
Nice. Was there anything that you missed about the publishing process? Any of the help that you got from the publishers that you haven't had this time?
Getting an advance was nice. It's like I'm paying everything up front for Husk. And obviously I make a lot more per book than I did going through the publisher. And so I can earn that back, and then it'll all be, profit after that. But, it's a big difference going from getting a $250,000 payment up front to spending 25 grand to produce something and possibly never making that back, right? Like I've already made a decent chunk back, I'm confident that I will. But that calculus is very different. Like you have to be in a position where you can afford to take that risk, and thankfully I am. But it does add this extra, scary, uncertain element to it that you don't have with a publisher. So, but that said, I really love the model of self-publishing your novel, getting it to a certain level of success, and then selling the trad rights or just selling the print rights, right? Like Matt Dinneman did this for Dungeon Crawler Carl, where he published the first 6 books self-published and then sold the print and audio rights, but he kept the Kindle rights. And that seems to have gone incredibly well for him. And like, Hugh Howey obviously is a big advocate for this. And I've heard of tons of deals like that happening. And in fiction, your email list and your audience is not as big of a factor as it is in nonfiction. In nonfiction, you can sell a book just based on your audience. You don't even have to have written anything yet. But in fiction, it's so much more driven by the actual book and the market and all of that. And the competition's insane because everybody wants to sell a novel. But if you already are selling tens of thousands of copies a year on Amazon, getting a book deal gets a lot easier and you get a much better deal. And I do think it's not worth taking a book deal unless you're in the 6 to 7 figure range where the publisher needs to make their money back and they're going to push your book into stores to try to do that. Like at a $10,000 deal, they have no incentive to try to help you sell the book. They're just going to like print it and then tell you to do everything. And it's like, okay, why would I give up most of my profit if you're not going to help me make this a success?
Yeah, definitely. Really interesting. Now, just the last final question. Now, I know you've got your big audience and you've worked hard to get that, but I just wanted to do a hypothetical situation where, say you didn't have your audience now, but you've retained the knowledge that you used to get that audience in the first place. Now, if you were launching yourself out as your science fiction author now, and you wanted to be just the author, not any of the other things you've done, what would be your strategy to growing that audience back up again?
It'd be Instagram and YouTube. That just seems like there's so many book buyers there and so many readers there. It's a strong community, and it's a community that likes indie authors as well.
Yep.
And that I think would pretty clearly be the spot to build that groundswell of momentum because, with an email list, there's no algorithm helping you. Like there's a little bit of one on Substack, but it's a much slower burn and it's worth doing, but it's not going to get you the initial readers in the first year that you might want. Whereas, if you figure out how to, and, assuming that I'm keeping my knowledge, like I know how to play the algorithm game, I'm quite good at it. And so I could just start a new Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, build those up, talking very aggressively about sci-fi fantasy and use that as the marketing channel. And I think that would be very, very powerful.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you spending some time chatting to me.
Yeah,
it's been
thanks, Teddy.
Really, really good conversation.
And thanks for answering my questions too. That was helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. So if your book is still on pre-sale at the moment, but when's it launching and where can they get hold of it in the pre-sale version as well?
Yeah, May 27th is when it'll be out on Amazon and everywhere else. In the meantime, you can go to huskbook.com and that'll redirect you to my site where you can get the pre-order bundle to get the hardcover plus the audio and the Kindle version. And I'm going to be sending out those hardcovers like the week before it actually launches. So people will get it a little bit early if they pre-order it as well. And yeah, I get all 500 books delivered tomorrow. So I'm pretty excited to receive that shipment and beg forgiveness from the UPS man for making him drop all those boxes off. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to send them out.
Big day for you tomorrow.
Big day. Yeah. Going to get my workout in.
And if people want to follow along with your newsletter or anything like that, where's the best place to find you?
Just nateliason.com is going to be the good place to go, or blog.nateliason if you want like the essays on Substack, but either one of those will work.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great chat and speak again soon. Good luck with the launch.
Yeah. Thanks, Teddy.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.